Hey everyone, this is David Andrade from Theory Animation, and this week we're going to go into the second half of our SIGGRAPH presentation. We're going to start it off with Bassam, who's going to introduce his new movie, Wires for Empathy. He's going to talk about some of the tools that he's used, some of the tools that he's developed, and all the hardships that he's run into with working with artists remotely. Then we're going to move into a Q&A between the panelists and the audience, where we cover topics like Kickstarter and crowdfunding, story development, and how to support multiple versions of software between different teams and artists.
Hi everyone, so I'm Bassam, and Francesco here in the second row is also on our team. We're making a movie called Wires for Empathy as an open movie project. Small bit of background, both of us are involved with Blender, the software that you guys at Theory are using. Blender is an open source animation program, pretty comparable to like Max, Maya, etc. And the Blender Foundation has in the past and continues to produce these open movie projects, which are basically Creative Commons projects. The movies, along with the software and all the assets, are released by the end of the production. And so as far as being a viable thing, the only thing I can answer to that is that they've gone through like 4 different projects so far at about a rate of 1 a year or one every 2 years, and that their next plan is to make a feature film, and that feature film, unlike all the other open movies, will be an online collaboration because it will no longer be practical to bring in the typical 6 or 7 artists into the studio to work all together. The plan is to actually collaborate with Blender studios working around the globe. All of these are budgeted productions. None of them are no-budget productions. The fundraising happens before the movie even starts. The movie I'm working on is a little bit different, partially distributed and partially centralized project. It's actually a little bit of a mix of both. We're working out of a university. We're working at Hampshire College in Western Mass. That's where Helga was developed, by the way. It was initially designed as a collaboration tool for students in the classes working on their projects to be able to collaborate on big projects. The screenshots you saw from the first animated project to use Helga, actually. It's a GPL-v3 open source software. So I just want to briefly say some of the things that have impacted us and the things that we're planning for in terms of remote collaboration. Firstly, it's much the same concerns that you listed in terms of like file storage, assigning tasks, being able to give feedback on different things. All of these are very important elements of the production that like each one becomes more difficult as you're spread around. And like the way we've handled these is with a lot of the same software. We use Subversion, which is a version controlling system to sort of maintain all our files, and that's like that's the thing that we've been doing on all the open movie projects, actually. The problem with Subversion is that while it's really great for tracking all your files and keeping all the old versions around, as your project grows, that central repository gets bigger and bigger, which is fine, especially fine if you're, you know, on a local network with it. But basically, you get to a point where you say you want to give a file to an animator and said, here, so you're going to work on one file, and in order to work on that one file, please download 20 gigs worth of stuff over your internet connection. And then they say, oh, well, I have a bandwidth cap of 1 gig a month here in South Africa or Cameroon or wherever they are. And you go, oh, okay. So that could be a problem. So we've partially solved this. What we'd like to see is, because our project and any big project is not, it's not like each file is its own universe. They're all linking assets from other files in your project. So you can't just like work on one file. The thing that we'd like to see going forward is having a nice tool to sort of distill the dependencies of each file and be able to give each person exactly what they need to work with and nothing more, and then be able to get that automatically back into the system without a lot of manual work. What we're doing right now is something a little bit convoluted, but it does work. we took a different versioning control system called Git, and one of the many neat things about Git is that some people have written some quite nice front ends to it. And one of these front ends is called Sparkle Share, and it's basically a program that works a lot like Dropbox. Unlike Dropbox, it's open source, and it's easily installable cross-platform, except for Windows XP, as we found out to our chagrin. But other than that, it's pretty cool. And what we do is we have a Python program that runs in Blender, and it finds out the dependencies of a given file. It makes a package, and it sets up a temporary Git repo, which is then shared with the specific artist needing to work on the project. That works really well for animators, because animators need to work on one file, so you have a sort of a well-defined point that you can say, okay, take this file, find its dependencies, ship it out. It doesn't work so well for texture artists, for instance. Texture artists would benefit from accessing the entire library of textures in the project, even if they're not like working on those particular assets, because then they can sort of grab the concrete that's in this shot and use it in the other shot easily, and not have to like reinvent more and more image assets for the same type of thing in the project. Unfortunately, we don't have a good solution for that right now. What we did is we just stuffed all our images on an FTP site and left it there. What we're kind of planning to do going forward is to rewrite our tools and kind of have the collaboration tools look a lot like a media sharing social network. Being able to browse the project before you grab a specific asset would be like a huge benefit. And I think we can use the kind of, there are, in terms of open source tools, there is actually a really good one that's out there that's being developed currently. It's called Media Goblin, and it's basically a federated version of Flickr, YouTube, SoundCloud, what have you. What it is, it's a media sharing software that is designed to work in a distributed way, and all the media types are plugins. So when you want to create a media type for Media Goblin, you can create a plugin for it. So right now it supports sound, video, images, and I think PDF documents. In the future, it could support anything really that you can imagine. And so you can even have a 3D file, like a blend file plugin, with its own little preview system as well that is defined by the platform. And if we can get another backend plugin to like attach that to a task management system, then we would kind of have like a lot of the puzzle together. We're also using a tool called Tract, which is written by Francesco. And the problem with Helga is that while it has like a really sophisticated task tree setup, it isn't really good for actually managing your project. It's actually very hard to get an idea of what's going on. What it's really good at is just putting up thumbnails of the, it allows you to upload previews of the stuff that you're working on and comment on it very easily and get like feedback fast. It's not very good at like getting a good management overview of your project. It's also a good place to spool the render, like it's tied into our render farm. Attract kind of handles the other side of that for us. So like basically you can tell at a glance where a shot is at, how many tasks are ready to go, and there's a nice stats page where you can get an overview of the whole project, and you can see exactly how far along you are in animation or lighting and so on and so forth, and it can kind of give you an idea of the bottlenecks that your project is currently facing.
Best practices for paying artists on budgeted projects?
I had one example. I wouldn't say it was a good one. I actually got inspiration for the way that I ran my site from another project that was paying the artists per shot. And they basically set a rate and said that they would assign a shot, assign a value that that shot was worth, and then when you were finished, you got paid. The snag was there was absolutely no nothing built in for how many revisions it could go through. So it was a bit of a nightmare, and unfortunately, they didn't really know what they wanted. So they could ask for as many revisions as they liked, and it wasn't a high-pay project in the first place. So the result of being paid was kind of a bit of a joke. So that system doesn't work very well.
We took the shot breakdown, and with the team, we all divvied up how complicated the shots were. And I've always been a big fan of open bookkeeping, so we knew exactly what the budget was from the client, and we all just divvied up all the shots and said, okay, I think that's worth that. And they said, no, you're not going to have that much for producing it, and all this type of stuff. We just negotiated it all, and as the shots all rolled in, we all just got paid. And luckily, it was a fairly big client, so they just paid. It wasn't a problem getting paid. That's fine. And that was all a remote team down in Australia and New Zealand.
I have been doing some other remote work recently, and that's just paid by the hour. I mean, that's really no different to working in the studio. You just tell them how much many hours you were putting in, you agree to a rate.
Going to your topic about it's the amount of money that you get and lifestyle, also getting an idea of what are some of the normal rates that are worked in different parts of the world, and eventually when going to pay, there's the bank wire transfers, and that has a cost, the MoneyGram, or all these different services, and that's also one of the good systems to use. And people understand. And even with the banks, they have their own systems where it's not a 3-day transaction. It could be even a month transaction. So, yeah. I'm Andres Martinez, by the way. I've been a CG supervisor for different films like Matrix, Superman, Spider-Man, 2012. And I run a community for Latin America, and I do projects remotely very often. One of those, obviously, the first things that I like to consider is free, open source. But when that does not apply to my project, I'm currently working on a 10-minute project. It's visual effects. So some of the issues that I have are different from what the animation projects, especially when dealing with a 5K plate and 150 plus visual effects shot. Most of the teams are in Latin America, and trying to fix some of the problems of downloading gigs and gigs and gigs. Part of the incentive, some of these projects are pro bono, but some of the incentive is I'll go to Best Buy, get a terabyte drive, and that's kind of like my way of saving or incentivizing the teams. They get all the plates, they get to keep the hard drive, and that's how we collaborate as well. The software that I've been using, or the website, it's called Teamwork PM, Project Management, and it allows me to do a lot of the things that you guys are doing, but always with anything, you have to adapt your pipeline and force the teams to use the pipeline that you're implementing. So it's great talks from every day.
Actually, one of the realities is that a lot of the people that are up here talking to you today are all on low budget or no budget projects. So we haven't had a lot of experience in how to pay the artists, and this is one of the reasons why we've used remote collaboration, because it's the only way we could reach out to a wide enough number of people in order to actually find the people prepared to work for free. But I don't think any of us really want to be doing multiple projects that way. They were foot-in-the-door projects in order to build things where we do want to get paid. But how to handle that is something we haven't all figured out yet.
Sure. So the question was, what do you think about minimum viable projects? These are making short but very specific things to try to get the interest out there. You know, one thing that we've done as a content company as well is we've made a web series. Ray and Clovis, you guys just saw Knock Knock. We plan to make a whole season releasing that out there. And so we're starting very small, but we're starting with like a web series to get that out there. A Kickstarter project works really well, but it requires one of two things. A, you're really famous and everybody knows you, like SIGGRAPH. Or B, you have like a niche following, you build your brand and you connect with your audience and you really work hard at that. You know, Kenny pulled off a great Kickstarter, you pulled off a great Kickstarter. This stuff does work, but it requires a large amount of either working hard for it or you already have that fan base there. So what we're trying to do is build that fan base by releasing these small 1 to 2 minute web series shows, get it out there, see the response. We don't have to take the risk of making a 10-minute show or an hour-long show. We just release something that's a full-fledged product, in this case a minute-long or 2-minute-long web show, and feeling that interest in everything. So that's our plan, at least.
A different take also on some of the issues that I'm sure most of you guys have dealt with. I'm particularly remembering your introduction in terms of what to share and what not to share at the beginning of the project is NDAs. And sometimes you send out an NDA and you say, could you please sign it so that I can share some of the work? And NDAs in some countries don't really mean anything. And so that's some of the problems that in a collaborative project, whether it's low budget, free, or a commercial, that's something that we also have to take in consideration. And understanding the laws, understanding the problems that you might get into with artists that get to a position that you kind of depend on them. They become the animation lead, and all of a sudden they, as you say, they take a job and they're gone. So some of the legal problems are also things to consider. I'm a board of directors at the Visual Effects Society, and that's one of the things that I'm always trying to be very conscious and aware of the artist. And in order to become, more aware of what's happening with the industry and people to recognize what you're doing, definitely I encourage people to join different associations, use LinkedIn, use YouTube, Vimeo, and show off all the work that you're doing so that people can understand and realize what you guys are doing as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, do you have any thoughts about connecting their Facebook profiles, maybe like Airbnb? That's the way you use the reputation engine for that. They use, like, if you mess up, it's your Facebook. I think you can only log in with Facebook, right? With Airbnb, I think, so they can check all your friends and check you're not some weird guy. Could we maybe build some type of platform recommendation? That's kind of what VFX Connection was trying to be back in the day. It was trying to be that type of recommend. But I mean, do you think we should build? Because it feels like there is a space there that needs to be filled. What do you do about internationally, not just locally, of people that do let you down, or at least let you down without an excuse?
Yeah. On the commercial side, on giving like a medal of recognition of best practices. Yes, this facility is paying. This facility is recognizing the artists and paying for the benefits where they have to, or things like that, and kind of like a seal of approval. That's one of the things that in the commercial world people are very concerned because nobody wants to burn any bridges. And in the social area, I think that we all work with teams that we kind of know each other, and if someone does not fulfill what they were supposed to, we kind of know each other, and that's kind of, they would get a bad mark, and maybe they would not participate in another project. So.
I just want to say, like in the film industry, there's this culture of everyone's out to get you, dog eat dog world. And I feel like everybody here, everybody up here we're at the inception of online collaboration. I mean, you guys just saw a whole bunch of films that were made by remote teams. 5 years ago, would that even be possible? Maybe, but look at what we've done in just the past couple of years. And I think we have the ability to lay a new foundation here where maybe it's not Facebook, maybe it's not LinkedIn because people don't want to share their private information. But the idea is if we can establish this culture of almost like a mutual trust. In many ways, Reddit works like this, right? Everybody kind of vets everybody else. So we're all aware if a studio or someone is trying to take advantage, or NDAs are virtually unenforceable outside the US anyway. So there's no point in really going through that. But we have this open culture here where everyone can kind of share information and help everyone get better. So I think that if we establish that now, I think that helps everybody to achieve their project and get their content finished.
it's about something you said about this being something that's in its infancy. Like right now, it's barely possible to do this. To be frank, like the tools that we're writing or that we're using, kind of barely work. And like this project that I've been working on has been like an exercise in like scrambling to sort of fix things so we can actually just get the movie done. So we've been working like very much like an ad hoc, crazy scramble, just fixing problems and sort of taking note where they are. So I don't feel like personally that we're at the level or the point where I'm even worrying about that stuff too much. In terms of like reputation or karma points or whatever, it's quite interesting to me actually that like sort of in the internet age, we kind of try to put a ranking on that, like to try to take so like reputation is a human thing. Like, I mean, someone has a good reputation because you've heard of him, you've had interactions with them, people have recommended, etc., etc. It's like all based on human interaction. And a lot of these systems are trying to like make that kind of a numbers game where people aren't involved anymore. And so you go and say, oh, this person has a ranking of 32. That means that they're very trustworthy. And it's a little bit strange, is all I have to say. Like yeah.
Actually, I did do something for my project. Again, I didn't really have a proper central database, but one of the things I did is all the people were signing up on my project, and as I say, we had 450 people sign up on the project, was I started keeping a spreadsheet. I could actually spit out a spreadsheet of everyone's contact details just from the website that we built. And then as I went along, as I had interactions with those people, I actually ranked them. Now, I know this is kind of scary and it's sort of a grey territory, but it had its benefits in a very sort of loose way. What I would do is I had columns for each person, I wrote, and I would, when somebody was very good at communication, their language skills were good, they got back to you quickly, I would rank them up in areas like that. When someone was actually signed up on the website, that really helped, because there were some people who would say, yeah, I'm going to come and do all this stuff, but they couldn't be bothered to even sign up on the site, so that was another factor. Then there was skill, and that is a very personal thing, but basically what that was for me was I was looking at their portfolios and their websites and their showreels, and I was ranking them on their suitability to the style of the project that we were making at the time. And it was very loose. It was just like a 1 to 5. But number of factors like this allowed me to very quickly order that, create a score that allowed me to order a very large number of people and find the people that I really, really wanted to work with. Now, that's not necessarily to the benefit of the artist, but it was to the benefit of me. And it did, to some degree, filter out some of the people that were not going to be as suitable for the project. The really scary thing is that I believe that that was so simple to implement that that's probably what a large number of the studios are already doing and not telling everybody. It was hidden for me during the course of the project. And then when I was done with the project, I published not the spreadsheet, but I explained what I was doing, so that other people who wanted to do projects like me could understand what the pros and the cons were and why I was doing it and all of this kind of stuff, because I wanted to come clean on it. It's kind of like, it seems like a really ugly thing to do, but in real terms, I had way too many people trying to get onto the project. I actually had a queue at any given time of a large number of animators just begging for shots. And I had to figure out a way of filtering down the people that were going to be most appropriate to fit. If nothing else, because of the responsibility I had to the rest of the team. It's no good just letting any Tom, Dick, and Harry come in and start working on things, because they would let down the people who were doing a decent job. So it was up to me to make sure that the standards were high.
Jacob have a remote studio, Workaholic Studios. And we've worked on many remote projects successfully, games and shorts and stuff, but I wanted to address, you guys were saying how this is all like low budget teams or no budget teams. Back in 2006, everyone knows of Real Effects, and they're trying to get more and more people in-house now. But in 2006, I did some remote work for them. And the pipeline they had, at least from my point of view, was super awesome. The remote pipeline they gave us was maybe better than almost any in-house pipeline I've worked on. So it's very viable for large studios that pay their artists to also do a remote system. I don't even know what it was, but it was super simple. I just dropped my file that I worked on there. It made the play blast. It cut it into the edit. My supervisor's notes are directly below it and stuff. It was phenomenal.
It feels like we're all doing the same thing and building different aspects of it, and have been since probably 2005 and earlier. It feels like we've got another separate group, maybe of, I don't know, pipeline tool guys or people that are more interested in building support structures for other people that want to do those things. So maybe make sure we all sign up on the form, and we'll send off a thread on that, and maybe make another separate group of lessons learned. I'm dying to learn from the Kickstarter campaigns as well. Like, any advice you have for those, that'd be great.
Well, first thing is, I'm kind of, I don't know, this might sound a little callous to the pipeline TD guys, but I'm sort of like totally uninterested in what the tools are, because I've been just dealing with like the executives that are in the position to like greenlight things. Like, there's no reason that like a film should cost $180 million. You know what I mean? Like an animated film. There's absolutely no reason. Even like the best film. I mean, I think with off-the-shelf Maya, we could probably do a frame-for-frame remake of Finding Nemo for like $15 million. You know what I mean? And that would still hold up. You know, kids would still go out and see Finding Nemo if it came out today. So I'm not as interested in the tools as I am trying to break ground and establish precedents on the business side. Keep on making the tools, guys. Keep on doing it, and you know, we're going to try to change things on the other side, like with collabs and stuff. But in terms of the Kickstarter thing, I had a really good turnout on the Kickstarter thing, but that is kind of, again, putting the cart before the horse, because like with the Veronica Mars movie and the SIGGRAPH movie. Kind of like people are, there's like two camps. Some people are saying like, well, these people have millions of dollars anyway, and in fact, the Veronica Mars movie is still owned by WB, right? And it's like, well, why are we paying the studio beforehand to, you know, why are we taking the risk on that film and whatever? The other camp says that like, well, if you have a huge amount of fans, that's bringing a huge influx into Kickstarter, and a lot of the people who funded Veronica Mars movie stuck around and looked at all these other creative projects, and millions of people that now are, you know, funding, you know, the smaller things. So there's like a trickle-down effect there. I'm split between them, but I really think that Kickstarter was the first, I think it was the first foray that really kind of started to make a dent in the risk assessment for the studios, obviously, because WB was like, you know, yeah, sure, go ahead and do this, and if it works, we'll totally make your movie. And there's a lot of other money that goes into a film than just filming the damn thing. So the fact that they were able, the fact that they said, yeah, if you raise this amount of money, that you can make a film, that kind of, you know, shows that things are changing in their minds. I do believe that there's a lot more work to be done to convince them that we actually have all the capital.
Hi, I'm Josh Burton. I did a Morpheus Kickstarter last year, and so thank you. So it was successful, but it was hard, and so I'd be happy to talk to you about some of the things we learned. But just in general, don't do your Kickstarter at the end of the year, because it's all profit to the government. So you get a big bite of taxes that you can't expense, because it's all, there's no time to expense it. So ended in January, ended in February, and that's a good way to go. But it was a great experience. David is one of my partners, and Ryan's another, and we wanted to find a way to make more rigs and tools. And so we went to the community that has been using Morpheus, and we asked them for support, and they gave it to us. So we're grateful for that. We're Morpheus 2 is coming along, and hopefully go to full body alpha in a couple weeks, and then on to face.
And I'll add a bit to that of best practices for successful Kickstarters, having that initial fan base. Because if you're just going out blindly, then you're just kind of hoping they'll be into what you're presenting to them. But if you have a fan base that already understands who you are and what you do, it's like your first push out, and then it's up to them to be the street team in a sense. What was it? It's like if once you hit that 20%, you have 80% of funding it. It's something like that. Who wants to field that first? Go for it.
We don't. Like in our case, we're crazy enough to use the latest version of Blender like all the time. So we actually started on 2.49, and then we went all the way to like 2.6a. I personally run an SVN checkout on my machine. Like I'm literally at the latest version of Blender. It gives us some pain because we have a substantial amount of Python code in our project. We have I hate to even count the lines of code. It's probably like 20,000 lines of code or something like that. And every now and then the API does change, and so you get like a little break. But I find that the cost of maintaining that code base against the current release is offset by the benefits we get from tracking trunk, because we get features we need that sometimes radically change the way we were planning on doing things. And because we're tracking the current version, we get all the bug fixes. Now, that might not be as important to people using other software, but like in our case, we can get bug fixes within a day or two of encountering a bug. So we don't do workarounds, we just report bugs and we get fixes. And if you weren't using trunk, then that would be not beneficial to us. So basically that's what we're doing. So yeah.
In our sense, since we're making webisodes, our turnaround time is about 3 to 4 weeks. So what we do is we lock off a version per episode, or in this case, we did a whole chunk of episodes. So we said 266A, no one go up, no one go down, stay at 266A, and get the animation done, get the rigs done, get everything done, render it out. And then we ran into a couple of bugs that we submitted to Trunk to get fixed, and they got fixed, and it was fantastic. And so now we've moved to the next version to encapsulate that. Did that mean that some of the rigs need to get updated? Yes. But Blender decreased their rendering time. So we saw an almost 10 to 15% jump in rendering faster when we went from 266A to 268, which is fantastic. So yes, even though we lost time in working on our rigs, we gained more in all of that back in rendering much faster. Now Maya, of course, is different, right? Maya usually has like a service pack once a year, plus the major version also, so it's like 2 versions every year. But Maya usually works pretty well on their release. And I mean, I know the service pack 1, 2, and 3, even back in 2011, there was a ton of service packs, but you can usually get by sticking on that version until you hit a delivery, and that's what we found that works for us, is sticking on a version till you hit a delivery, and there's a bit of a breaking point where, okay, let's move everybody up. So in our case, we're a small team, and we're not doing massive projects, but we find that hitting a deliverable and then jumping up to the version, even though we're going to lose some time in rebuilding things, we will gain it in efficiency and in bug fixes.
This isn't actually a problem that's unique to remote work. Obviously, it does complicate things. In my particular case, my solution was make the thing as fast as possible so that everybody was on one version, and I discouraged them from switching to a new version. We did actually end up as a split pipeline because we had animation being done on one version and rendering being done on another version, because the rendering had, the other version, the higher version had fixes for rendering. But it really complicates things. But as a prime example, I used to work for a studio that we worked on silicon graphics machines back in the day, and basically the entire project was working on silicon graphics, and somewhere along the line silicon graphics was becoming less widely used, and other teams within the same company started switching to Windows, and we were getting they were able to have much more sophisticated equipment, and the machines were faster, but our project was still locked into using silicon graphics, and it was a bit of a nightmare. I think we went a full 2 years past the point where everybody else in the company, all the other teams, had switched to new PCs, and we were still using these old Unix machines. Now, the worst thing about that was the company wasn't prepared to spend any more money in upgrading us, because they knew that they would ultimately be dumping all of that and going towards Windows. So it's not a unique problem for remote. It happens in all the studios anyway.
I was just going to say we have the unique experience of having worked on our project for a very, very long time, about 7 years. So, yeah, doing it really fast thing didn't work for us. And in fact, we switched rendering systems, the way we did it, involved new software, and it was mostly just a process of brute force of getting everything to work and making sure that where we could be efficient and make sure that it was version controlled, we could. But I don't think that there's any easy way to work around it, my experience with that.
The legal consequences of using illegal software and what that means in different parts of the world. From a community point of view, where I do a lot of projects, pro bono projects, I tell the guys, do this, and really, I would probably have a preference in the type of software, but I'm oftentimes not really concerned about the version. From a commercial point of view, there are some projects where I do specify we are going to be using Maya 2011, and there is an NDA, there's a contract that gets signed, there's a lot of things because I do want to be doing the right things. And at least, again, there's a document that says they were using that version. Whether they eventually use it or not, I'm oftentimes not very aware of it, but at least there's a contract. And there are times where I do work with companies that I say, well, the requirement is Maya 2010, let's say. They're like, oh, we're in 11. I'm like, this is the requirement. And luckily the teams are large enough where I can say, well, you know what? If you're going to be using menstrual rate, then I'm going to have to be doing this. And so it's easy to say, at least on paper, I'm doing the right things.
On this subject, actually, one thing I'd really love to see is that we get to a point where the artists that are working remotely from their home, they purchase for themselves the equipment up to a certain level of standard, but not the software. And that the virtual studio provides an entire environment where the software is provided to them. So that as they take on each project, they would just sign into their web server or something like that, and they would download the software that required for that project and the assets involved for that project. And so this is a question now of going to companies like Autodesk and asking them to do the kind of model that we're now starting to see from Microsoft and Adobe. If we can get to that level, then that's really going to simplify remote work.
For the first collabs, I was working with a guy that had a pretty well-developed idea, and he had put years into the script and to some visual development and to a little bit of animation as well. He actually got pretty far on what he was doing, and then we were going to work with him. And I think that's just for the infancy of this new business model, that's kind of how it's going to be. So it's kind of the Hollywood model of, doing some spec work and it getting picked up, I think, is just how it's going to naturally work. A lot of the the huge part of the problem, like when I pitch at Disney, the funny thing is that they like, oh yeah, this is fantastic, and we might talk to you about developing this further. And I'm like, oh, what does that look like? And they say, well, normally we work with individual creators, and they don't own a studio like you do, but like we can give you like 6 months or so to give us back like 5 minutes of animation, and budget's like like $20K. I'm like, what? $20,000 and 5 minutes? And this is like a deal that people take, So the crazy thing is like Disney would lose $1 million on the couch and they wouldn't even realize it, So and if you put $1 million into the development of a project, we would be seeing a lot more projects like Wreck-It Ralph and things like that. So what's the point? The point is that they have a huge amount of their machine dedicated to risk mitigation, and it's not a good idea for us to take on all of that, risk while we're still trying to develop the artistry and the tools and the workflows of collaborating online. To the point where we're just saying like, oh yeah, well we're going to make even like story, like a 1.5 years of story as part of our process. Right now, that's how I feel. We're going to have to start with things that are a lot more developed and have some stuff behind them. I think that's how I feel. You had something to say?
My name is Roberto Ortiz. I'm from the CG Society. I run basically most of their challenges for students. Here's a question I was going to ask. Aren't we kind of like putting the cart before the horse? I mean, wouldn't it be easier to basically follow the history of what we have done before in terms of animation, going back to the Looney Tunes model, specifically instead of having shorts, and allow for people to develop IP using more shorts that basically run at less of a risk, and basically develop the teams around kind of like a shorts type program that allows them to grow. It's kind of like how Pixar developed their pipeline when they were back in the 80s, that they basically started a shorts program. From there, they actually built into doing Toy Story. And also affiliate ourselves with other sides of the industry, the writers, comic book artists, for example, and basically develop using shorts IP to see if it has legs and continue developing it. And the advantage of the shorts is that it allows for experimentation to try to make something grow.
No, that's a great point, and that's something that we're doing at Theory. When we made Nuts for Pizza, that was because a squirrel landed on my friend's head walking out of a movie theater. I'm like, short. 3 years later, we made a short. One of the animators who worked with us, Evan DeWeiler, wanted to do his own idea, and he had spent 10 years since he was in art school, 10 years later, not in 10 years in art school, 10 years later, just still developing this idea, and that is Rain Clovis. At Theory, every 6 months we have a pitch night. Anyone can pitch an idea. They own the copyright. If Theory, our company, helps them, then we'll negotiate like a license or a profiting deal with them, which is what we did with Evan. And we shepherded the idea. We helped them out. Of course, it encouraged us to build more tools. Theory Render was born. Here we are today. It's 1.5 years later, we finished Rain Clovis. So you're absolutely right that I think we're tackling this from all different points. Kenny has a really unique model where he's doing collabs to try to have people own a piece of the pie. And we're coming from it from that same angle. And I know even on your website, you've said the same thing, owning a piece of it. We're also trying to like shepherd and incubate ideas. And that's kind of one of the core foundations of like helping artists create a product and shipping it, which is really important because we can always get lost in like, I want to change it this way or that way. I mean, I don't know if you were really looking closely, but there like sometimes the outlines on a character would shift or things in the background were like always moving. We could always make it better, right? But no one noticed that, or at least if you did notice it, then don't say anything. But my point is we made a great little cartoon, and yes, a lot of things could be better. The animation, the rendering, there's still a little bit of noise and everything, but we shipped a product. We helped incubate it, we helped put all the artists together into production, and we shipped it. I'd love for this to continue. We're a small group, but there's a lot of energy, and there are a lot of people here who could also help shepherd ideas. And you are like fidgeting over there, so I'm going to give you the... all right.
Yeah, what we're doing I'm from Studio.coop. We are basically doing kind of all of the similar thing. We approach it from a different way. We develop an MVP. For example, we get the character designs, we set them out, we see what the response is. And what we're trying to achieve is like 10 minutes of animation, 10 seconds of animation or 15 seconds to test it out, see if people like it, and that even might help you on a Kickstarter campaign, on a future thing to promote them. So like iterating as fast as possible, see if an idea works, if people like it, if they don't like it, like move over to the next one, don't fall in love. Like continue doing that. That's our philosophy on it. We try to do it only a few seconds so that we don't end up working 1.5 years to see if it turns out or not. We might work a few months and then move on, you know, or continue with it.
So it makes me think of, I'm learning a lot, obviously, from all this. It feels at some point we should make a set of best practices of things that we all recommend. So at least we have a list somewhere that like we recommend you do these things. And if you have success in any other place, just please add it to this list. And at least we know who did it and what it was, and we can all learn from it. So I think we're kind of building a bit of a community here.
Everyone's like, failures. Oh, we have them. This is terrible. Kenny's working on his project. He has students all over. And one thing led to another, and some little robot in a script, whole thing gone. Emails to me and Mark, where did it go? We don't even know where it went, but we fixed it, you know. So failures happen. We have problems sometimes where people are a faraway country, their bandwidth is low, their bandwidth is capped. What do we do, you know? So in our case, we sent him only what we needed via email, and then he downloaded it. He sent it back to me, and then we synced it back to the team. And we were able to squash the bug that knocked out Kenny's thing and find that, oh, is this kind of like workflow error. I think, too, that hopefully this little birds of a feather will establish a precedent, because I'd love to do this again next year and to get everybody back into this room and kind of talk about it and keep going forward and focus it on online collaboration. We have the list, we have our blog and our website. This is being recorded. I'll have the presentation up there. And then you bring good points like failures and best practices, but I think this establishes a really nice, really solid base and a good footing to go on.
Just quickly, if you are looking for to learn an awful lot about the failures, then go and check out devilsangelsanddating.com, because, like I said, I made the entire project public. So from day one, everything is out there, and it's still there. We're actually paying to keep the website up online so that everyone can look through the critiques for every single shot, the threads for all the assets and all this kind of stuff. Plus, I have a blog at animatedfilmmaker.com where bit by bit I'm telling stories about all the ups and the downs and things that went wrong. But basically, that's all there as an entire resource. And I'm hoping part of the reason we ran a Kickstarter a while back, Shin and I, was that we wanted to try and keep that online as a resource, particularly for students and other collaborators like us that want to learn from all the good and the bad. It's all right there, all the ugly stuff, it's right there. So that's devilsangelsanddating.com. Animatedfilmmaker.com. Cool.
I think one of us said this about, like, or it was you, Michael, and you guys all touched on. I think if failures, benefits, and everything, I think if we can establish, like, getting used to this idea and different ways to work, it doesn't help us if our pipeline is super different from the way you guys work, and vice versa, you know, how Blender and Maya, I mean, Alembic is an idea of, like, merging all the file formats together. I think that this whole second screen revolution, working remotely and everything, all of this is kind of coming. So I really think that, to almost a degree, yes, we should establish either an association or just like a way to communicate, or a forum, or a newsletter, whatever it is, but some way to, like, this helps everybody. You know, this is not a zero-sum game. This helps everybody if we can all talk about this and share these ideas. So.
Well, actually, I already started a group on Facebook called Animated Filmmaker, and another one on LinkedIn, also called Animated Filmmaker, trying to just open it up to people like us that actually want to swap stories and tales. It's just there, just join up.
Well, I mean, we should get together before we blast everyone one part of the email and then blast them again with another part. So we'll put together a sizable email and then blast it out to you guys, and then take all your feedback in so we're all part of the same conversation. Set up some sort of form or web presence where we can all interact instead of sharing an email list, because I don't really like sharing my email to tons of people because I don't want that constant spam or anything like that. But something that you guys can choose to opt into, and I think that would be great, so we can, again, all talk about this.
I hope you enjoyed our presentation, and if you did, show your love by subscribing to our channel. We'll update the channel weekly with new cartoons, blended tutorials, and presentations like these. So until next time, this is David Andrade from Theory Animation.